Rome. Hey, Rome. How are you doing? How are you doing, buddy? Hey, Della. Hey, Della. I'm just doing all the things I gotta do.
Wouldn't have believed if you told me last December I'd cross the border this year more times than I can remember. Back and forth from Canada to the United States. Yeah, we hustle on the move, we do whatever it takes. And I never could have imagined I would travel so much. My brown and documented people, y'all know that it's rough. Got gringos calling us illegals. We got indigenous blood, oh no, hold up. Must be playing, they the racist land invader, mass murder, earth betraying ones. Yo, much respect to all the natives who took time to share their stories I can't put into words what y'all have really done for me. And Logan Savage fam been showing me the way, cultivating the rage, motivating me to stay brave like a bimbo about to break. Please know we appreciate all our folks in the cut who steady bumping the music. Every show was a blessing, blasting louder acoustic, taking notes from the youngsters who were holding it down in their ancestral homeland. They're gonna turn the shit around. To all the young sisters, always elevate your voice. You carry gifts within you, make some motherfucking noise. If some dude tries to shut you down or make you feel small, it's just cause they don't understand your power at all. Now we recognize the indigenous-led land defense worldwide, native lives demonstrating excellence. Born to ride, born to defy these crackers, colonial ignorance. These rhymes of resistance, all what got me on the road. Believe I had to examine every word that I wrote, cause the youth were listening when I was standing to speak. Cause I'm coming from the struggle and they was feeling the beat. So I had to make sure that I was coming correct. Took time to sit back and really reflect. If you wanna build through the music, you must foresee its effect. But the learning curve's sharp, we don't got much time left. Don't got much time. Don't got much time left. No, no, huh, woo, huh. Yo, rest in power to the students murdered in Ayotzinapa. Pinches puercos del gobierno se dieron cuenta lo que pasa. Intentaron enterrar semillas y el país prendió fuego. Not waiting for anyone to free his homies in a lonely land, screaming fuck the police. We don't beg our oppressor, we hold court in the streets. Ferguson and coast to coast, it's open season on a pig. Fighting for our freedom is the only way we'll live. There's never been justice on stolen land. This needs to be the year the revolution began. There's never been justice on stolen land. This needs to be the year the revolution began. Was this the year the revolution began? Time will tell, time will tell. I ain't been sober like this since I was damn near 13. Hey yo, I'm feeling so sharp, my mind's feeling so clean. See, I decided this year that I can't drink like I used to, but most of the homies always stay looking for an excuse to pour up a cup of that white man's peace. But when you good on that shit, you learn to tell them like this: the liquor makes you sick, them beers make you soft. The more that you drink, the more our people get lost. The liquor makes you sick, them beers make you soft. The more that you drink, the more our people get lost. But see, what really gets me heated is how proud you fucking sound, bragging about how many shots you about to show me you can pound. Man, that's flashbacks in mis tíos, borrachos growing up who only showed their soul and faces when they needed a buck. They'd get into the cases and then my mom would be stuck cleaning up broken bottles and blood spilled from the pipes, and that ain't even rock bottom. You don't wanna hear about those nights, but I already know what you gon' say. You not an alcoholic, but how many of your friends are, and what could you do to stop it? This a whole other topic for a whole other song, so let me wrap it up. Yeah, let's just move it along. See, I've been running for a minute, adrenaline's got me reckless. Try to keep up with my lyrics, got you looking breathless. You could never kill my spirit, but you should just call me dead, please. What? Said I've been running for a minute, adrenaline's got me reckless. Try to keep up with my lyrics, got you looking breathless. You could never kill my spirit, you could just call me deathless. That's it. 2014's damn near done. We're just preparing for what's to come.
Today we have a great surprise and a great blessing. Mark R. Charles is with us. Many of you who were with us last year know that he got snowed out last year. And I thank God for certain ministers of the gospel who refuse to let things happen twice. And so as soon as the projection of the weather came and the snow, which is now in D.C. and shut down all the airlines in D.C., Mark on his own bought an Amtrak ticket to get here. And so we thank God for his diligence. I met Mark a number of years ago at the Calvin Institute for Christian Worship, where he serves on the advisory board. And he and I are very dear friends of the director there, John Whiffleet, who is a phenomenal person. Mark has traveled around the country and around even beyond the country, sharing a message that I think we all need to hear. He is a blogger. His website and his blog is called Wireless Hogan. And you might want to ask him what that means during the lunch forum that follows today's chapel. He is a prolific and profound writer, speaker. He is actually in the middle or almost close to the end of writing a book with our own alum, Soong Chang Ra, on the doctrine of discovery. And many of you who've been in my courses know a little bit about the doctrine of discovery and how challenging that work is. And so we thank God for one in the person of Mark Charles, who has accepted God's challenge to talk about difficult topics, to take the journey of faith in a way that is not only humbling and gracious, but to do the Lord's work in the depth of the wilderness. And so the voice that you will hear after mine is none other than our dear friend, our dear brother, Mark R. Charles.
Yat Mark Charles Yinishia. Sin Bake Danan Nishle, the Tohiglini Bashichin. Sin Bake Danan Bashiche, the Todachitni Bashanella. In the Navajo culture, when you introduce yourself, you always give your 4 clans. We're a matrilineal people, and so our identities come from our mother's mother. Now, my mother's mother happens to be American of Dutch heritage, and so in my introduction, I say Tsin Bake Danan, which translated means I'm from the wooden shoe people. My father's mother, my second clan, is Toa Higlini, which is the waters that flow together. My third clan, my mother's father, is also Tsin Bake Danan. And then my fourth clan, my father's father, is Todachitni. That's the Bitterwater clan. It's one of the original clans of our Navajo people. Before I go any further today, I want to just take a few moments to honor and acknowledge the...
Actually, Della, are you still here? If you are, ETA on game time. Okay. Oh yeah, we got time. We got time. Okay, thank you, sister.
The Mashpee Wampanoag people, the Massachusetts, and the Nipmuc tribes. These are the tribes of people, some of the tribes of people who were living here before Columbus got lost at sea. These were the people who had societies here, they had trade here, they had treaties here, they had alliances here, they had families here, they were hunting and fishing, they were growing crops long before white settlement came in, long before anyone moved from Europe into this area. And I think it's just important to remember these things. It's important to acknowledge that this land was not discovered. It was conquered, it was colonized, it was not discovered, it was stolen. And so I like to remember those things, but I also like to just honor the people who have stewarded these lands, some for hundreds, even other tribes, thousands of years. I usually ask this, and I know a lot of the tribes on the East Coast have been wiped out and are no longer in existence, but if there's anyone from the Wampanoag or the Nipmuc people, if anyone here from either of these tribes? Okay, I like to ask, just in case there's someone here, I like to just acknowledge their presence. But if we could just give a hand to the tribes that stewarded these lands for so long. Now I want to start this morning with a prayer, but also by reading the text that we're going to be discussing this morning. And this is coming from Matthew chapter 6. So if you'll bow with me in prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. If you're anything like me, you were raised saying this prayer, reciting this prayer, you don't 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 saying this prayer, reciting this prayer. And whenever I read this prayer, it kind of terrifies me because I'm asking God to forgive me like I forgive others. And I know I'm not perfect in forgiving others. And that terrifies me at times. That I'm actually asking God to forgive me the same way I forgive others. Because I don't often easily forgive others. The other part of this prayer that we tend to not think about much is the line just before that where it says, give us today our daily bread. And this is the line I want to talk about with us today. Give us today our daily bread. We have a perception of this line, and all of us pray it, and we think about it, but we have created this sentence or this prayer to be much more of an idea, but not a literal prayer.
Oh, come on, Gob. By now, I'm sure you would realize this brother literally may come out so he can understand or relate to the audience that he's talking with, right? But you damn well know he's throwing in indigenous in there. You know it's all circling around to indigenous, right? Come on now. If I'm sitting around a bunch of Christians, I will talk with them about Christianity so that they understand what the hell I'm talking about. So there's a point of reference. It's always strategy. Well, if, like his goal, he says, is trying to build that relationship, a common relationship. So to build a common relationship from people that have no idea about what the hell you're talking about, you have to talk on how they understand or where they can understand. You have to find that common ground, or you have to speak with them how they understand it. Come from a spot of where they understand. Sorry. And then move forward from that.
So we think, yes, it should remind us to be grateful for what we have. It should remind us to praise God for whenever we eat, whenever we have nourishment, to remember that this is ultimately came from God, and we should remember these things. But we don't, and most of us have probably never, or very seldom, literally prayed for our daily bread, right? Our entire society is set up so we don't have to pray this prayer. And in fact, we have kind of an unwritten rule within the church that says if you ever pray this prayer, you need to be careful because God is not going to be happy. If you ever pray this prayer, it's actually followed by a confession or even prefaced by a confession of, God, I was wasteful. God, I didn't plan ahead. God, please forgive me for not thinking about these unforeseen circumstances. And so we come to pray this prayer. If we ever have to literally pray this prayer, we rarely don't tell anybody that we're praying this prayer because there's something that is associated with shame about actually literally praying for your daily bread. Now, I'm not talking about praying for your favorite bread. I'm not talking about praying for better bread. I'm talking about praying for your daily bread. You have nothing in your cupboard, nothing in your wallet, nothing in your checking account, and there's nothing coming in the mail. You have nothing, and you literally have to ask God to feed you today. We don't pray this prayer. We go through great lengths to protect ourselves from having to pray this prayer. I spent about 11 years with my people back on the Navajo reservation. And when we moved there, we had to make a choice, which is how were we going to go? I was the pastor of a church in Denver. It's called the Christian Indian Center. And I wanted to understand more about my native people and my own tribe. And so we wanted to move back to our reservation to explore the understandings of contextualizing worship for native people. And we had an opportunity to live in a very remote section of our reservation in a hogan, a traditional Navajo dwelling. We were 6 miles off the nearest paved road on a dirt road. The community we lived in had no running water, no electricity. The family we lived near, they wove rugs and herded sheep for a living. And so the first question we had to ask is, how are we going back? Are we going back supported as missionaries by my church or by my denomination? Or are we going back just to live? Because if we went back as missionaries with the church, there's no way we could go until we were fully funded. We couldn't go until we had a line of supporters both praying for us and giving to us. We couldn't go until we had health insurance. We couldn't go until we had everything to keep us safe and insulate us from the hardships of my community. Or we could just go with nothing and live among my people and experience life as my people experienced it. And we decided to do the latter. And so we went, and I was there during the Great Recession. And so what was interesting was we never even talked about the recession on the reservation. On our reservation, we have 50% unemployment in a good year. So 12 to 15% unemployment was like a dream for us. It didn't happen for us. We still had 50 to 60% unemployment. But what the country was struggling with was like, that'd be a dream for our people. And so as well, I was living there, and I watched, and we were there for 11 years, and we were in this hogan for 3 years, and in another part of the reservation, we were there for 8 years, and we watched every summer, wave after wave, hundreds of teams and thousands of missionaries come onto our reservation, all fully funded, all with their little vans, all self-sufficient, all with everything they needed. And as I watched this over and over, year after year, and I recognized I was with a group of people, and in our churches, we would regularly have to pray for our daily bread. Most of the people are on a fixed income. Most of the people are living hand to mouth. Most of the people have no investments. They have no savings. They have nothing to fall back on. And so when the monthly check runs out, there's literally nothing for them to go forward with. And they have to pray. We have to pray for our daily bread. And I began to recognize that the faith of our people on our reservation exceeded the faith of any missionary that's ever come here. Because your relationship with God fundamentally changes when you ask Him for your daily bread. No amount of education, no amount of degrees, no amount of reading books or hearing lectures can ever bring you to the point of relationship with God that waking up one morning and realizing, I have nothing to eat and I need God to feed me today. That will fundamentally change your relationship with the God of the universe. And so I began to think about these things very deeply. And I recognized that there was a dynamic going on in the church. And I call it the dynamics between power and authority. So power is the ability to act. You have muscles so you can lift something up. Authority is the right of jurisdiction, the permission to act. Now, we live in a world and we attend churches that are obsessed with power. A week doesn't go by that someone from Wall Street doesn't remind us we have the most wealthy financial system in the history of the world. A day doesn't go by when our president or a politician or someone from Washington doesn't remind us that we have the mightiest military in the history of the world. We are in a nation that is obsessed with power. We have the ability to act. We can do whatever we want. You will almost never hear these same voices talk about authority. Why? Because by and large, we don't have any. We have the permission to act, but we have no authority. What happens to the influence of America if we go bankrupt and our nuclear arsenal goes obsolete? What countries give a hoot what we have to say? Correct? We have no authority. We have tons of power. We have no authority. Now, this filters into our thinking because we tend to think about Jesus as having a lot of power and authority. I mean, the scriptures tell us all power and authority has been given to him, and we tend to think about Jesus as operating out of his power. I mean, he performed miracles, he did all these amazing things. But I want to look specifically at the Gospel of Mark in the context of praying for your daily bread and look at how did Jesus actually interact. So most of the things we're impressed by with Jesus came not from his power, but from his authority. So in the first few chapters of the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is in the synagogue and he's teaching, and people are amazed. Why? Because he taught as one who had authority. Not like the scribes and the teachers of the law. They had their bibliography. According to Rabbi so-and-so, let me tell you this. According to scroll such and such, let me tell you this. Jesus stands up and says things like, well, you heard this was said, but let me tell you what we were thinking when we wrote that down. Jesus didn't talk like someone who studied Scripture. He talked like someone who wrote it. And that blew people's minds. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who read a good book and someone who wrote a good book? Two completely different conversations. And so they heard Jesus talking. It's like, this guy talks like he wrote Scripture. That blew them away. And then a man with an unclean spirit stands up in the same synagogue, and with authority, Jesus speaks to him, and the spirit leaves. The people they didn't know what was going on. One day, Jesus is out with his disciples. They're in a lake. A squall comes up. Now, his disciples, some of them are experienced fishermen. They've been through this before. Jesus is in the front sleeping. We misinterpret this passage all the time. We think they were afraid. I don't think they were afraid. I think they were mad. Jesus, I don't care who your daddy is. Stand up, grab a bucket. This is all hands on deck. Come on. Jesus wakes up, looks around, assesses the situation, and acts. But he doesn't grab a bucket. Wind, calm down. Waves, be still. And they listened. Then it says the disciples were terrified. Did you see that? Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. They had never seen that kind of authority before. It blew their minds. So Jesus, in Mark chapter 6, he calls his disciples to them, and he sends them out. And before he sends them out, what does he do? He gives them authority, correct? Cast out demons, preach the word, and heal the sick. And then he says, go out. Now, what's his next command? Do you remember? Take nothing with you. No wallet, no extra tunic, no extra food, no extra clothing. Go out with nothing. Don't take any power. He is literally sending them out to do a mission trip and asking them every morning to start their day by praying for their daily bread. Now, if you've ever literally prayed for your daily bread, you know the hardest thing to do is to think about serving the needs of those around you. But Jesus, this wasn't the first episode of Survivor. He wasn't saying just go out and live. He was saying go out and serve. He was saying wake up every morning, pray for your daily bread, and while you're down on your knees, pray for the needs of those around you, and then stand up and start serving them. If you ever have prayed for your daily bread, you know how almost impossible of a task that is. But this is what he sends his disciples out to do. Now, I don't think this is going to ruin anything if there's a towel. Now, the disciples come back, and the first thing we have to note is they're not dead. Right? So something worked. I mean, they lived. But now they were so successful that they have followers, and there's so many people around, they have no time to eat. And so Jesus says to them, okay, guys, come away by yourselves. Let's go across the lake and get some rest. And so they go in the boat, they get in this boat, they go across the lake, but there's a flaw in Jesus' plan, which is the lake's pretty small. And so the people who are all milling around, they just run around the lake and beat them there. Now they get across the lake, and the disciples, you can almost see them rolling their eyes, right? Because Jesus sees the people, they're like sheep without a shepherd, and what does he begin to do? Well, he starts to teach them. The disciples allow him to teach for an appropriate amount of time. But middle of the afternoon, early afternoon, they're like, Jesus, it's a lonely place, and there's nothing here to eat, so you should send these people away so they can go get some food. Jesus, right. That's a great idea. They are hungry. You feed them. The first thing they do is they go back to their power. We don't have enough money. It would take 8 months of a man's wages to feed these people. Are we supposed to go and spend that on bread? Well, Jesus says, well, what do you have? They go out, they find this kid, they shake him down. They grab his lunch, they come back. 5 loaves and 3 fish. This isn't even enough for Peter to eat. And I love what Jesus does, because he takes this Lunchable, and he doesn't say, God, I have this small amount of food and this vast amount of people. Please multiply this. He lifts it up, and he thanks God, and then begins passing it out. Now, there's so much that not only does everyone eat and have their fill, but each disciple picks up a basket full of food at the end of the process. If you want to give that to me, I'll just put it down here to soak up this water. Thank you. That not only does Jesus make enough to feed everybody, but there's a basket full of food for each of the disciples to pick up. Now, immediately after this is over, Jesus gives his disciples another command. Okay, you guys go across the lake and prepare the next place for us. I'm going to stay here and dismiss the people. So the disciples get in their boat, they get in the lake, they start going across the lake. Jesus goes up on the mountainside, he dismisses the people, and then he looks out and the disciples haven't gone anywhere. Why? Because the wind's against them. The wind's blowing hard. They can't row against it. Jesus doesn't do anything. He waits there. Literally in through the night. Finally, about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, he looks out. The disciples are still in the middle of the lake. They haven't gone anywhere. So Jesus, he goes out on the lake. But if you read the book, the gospel account of Mark, he's not going to help them. It says he meant to pass them by. So they're rowing in the lake, and Jesus is walking across it, and the disciples freak out. They've been rowing all night. They never got the rest they were promised. They're probably tired and grumpy, and they think it's a ghost, and they start crying out. Jesus hears their cries. He walks over to them and says, guys, calm down. It's only me. You don't have to be worried. And then he gets in the boat, and immediately the winds die down. And it says the disciples were astonished. Why? Because they did not understand about the loaves. They didn't understand what Jesus meant when he said, "You feed them." So let's go back and look at that closely. What did Jesus mean? What were the options? When Mark wrote this down, when Jesus said, "You feed them," what did he expect the disciples to do? Well, there's really only two options of what they could do. So just before this, in another section of this gospel, before this interaction, Jesus is out and he teaches a parable. There's a huge crowd of people around, and Jesus stands up and gives a few farming tips. Here's what happens when you throw seed on the road. Here's what happens when you throw it in the gravel. Here's what happens when you put it in the weed. Here's what happens when it's in good soil. Just a few basic farming tips. Everyone's waiting for the thunder, for something to happen. Nothing happens. Eventually, everybody starts leaving. The only ones left are the disciples. And they come to Jesus and say, What did you mean by that? "Ah," says Jesus, "you have the secret of the kingdom. To everyone else I speak in parables, lest they turn and be forgiven, but to you I explain everything." What's the secret of the kingdom? What do they have that no one else has? What do they get that no one else gets? The only thing they do differently is they don't leave. They stay and ask questions. The secret of the kingdom is Jesus wants people to ask questions. He wants to teach in the context of relationship. And so one option is Jesus wants his disciples to ask questions. You feed them. What do you mean by that? Now, the problem with that theory is that whole secret of the kingdom passage is in the context and language of insider versus outsider. And Mark doesn't bring that language into this story. So it's a bit of a literary jump to think he's trying to get us to think back to this story when he doesn't use the repeated words or themes from that story in this context. So it kind of works, but it's not a solid hit it out of the park home run. The second option that Jesus could have meant is he wanted them to do what he did. Find the kid, take his lunch, thank God for it, and pass it out. Well, the problem with this option is Jesus has never multiplied food before. This is the first time in the Gospel of Mark. So he would be giving them a test of something he hasn't demonstrated or even told them they could do. So the only way that option works is if there's a passage either earlier in Mark or somewhere in the Old Testament where God expects his leaders to do something he hasn't even told them they could do. So now let's go back to Exodus chapter 14. So Exodus chapter 14, God has been doing the 10 plagues through Moses with Pharaoh, and he's finally relented and released the people of Israel from their slavery. And they're going out to worship God in the wilderness. As they're leaving Egypt, God pulls Moses aside and says, "Okay, Moses, here's the plan. Don't go this way. If you go this way, you're going to hit a battle. My people aren't ready for that. I want you to go out this way. Pharaoh's going to think you're confused. I'm going to harden his heart. He's going to come and try to get his slaves back, but don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of everything." So God says, "Go this way." So Moses goes this way. After a little while, they hit the Red Sea. They turn around. Sure enough, God's hardened Pharaoh's heart. They see the dust in the distance behind them. He's on his chariots coming to take this people back into slavery. Now, the people of Israel lose it. They have no hope or confidence that God or Moses can do anything to help them. Was it because we told you, Moses, we would rather be slaves in Egypt than corpses here in the desert? Like they lose all confidence that God or Moses can do anything to help them. Now, Moses, who's not a very confident leader, right? God calls him. He's like, "I don't want to go. Don't send me. I can't talk." He starts writing the Psalms. He tells the people, "Be still. Wait on the Lord. If you cry out to God today, the enemies you see now, you will never see." I mean, this is literally almost the Psalms by David just a few generations later. This is by far one of the most confident, faithful prayers Moses has ever said up to that point in his ministry. What's amazing is the very next verse. God sees Moses down on his knees, praying faithfully, and he turns to him, and he doesn't rebuke the people, he rebukes Moses. What are you crying out to me for? They're coming. Stand up, take that staff, and part the Red Sea. You saw what it did in Egypt. Take it out for a test drive. What else can you do with it? He's literally rebuking Moses for not coming up with the idea of parting the Red Sea himself. That should terrify you. So when Jesus said to the disciples, you feed them, he expected them to do what he did. Find the kid, take its lunch, thank God, pass it out. When they didn't get it, he modeled it for them and did it for them. And then he gave them another command, cross this lake. I'm going to stay here and dismiss the crowd. He sends them out. He dismisses the crowd. They're not crossing the lake. They're rowing. Now, he's already calmed the sea before, so he lets them row all night. 4 a.m., he's like, they're still not getting it. I guess they need a demonstration. So he goes out. He's not going to help them. He meant to pass them by. He's like, guys, this is what you do. You can't row, get out and walk, or calm the sea. You've seen me do that before. They don't get it because their hearts were hardened. They did not understand about the loaves. They couldn't get out of this power mindset. They couldn't get into this understanding of spiritual authority. They were so stuck on what was in their wallet that they weren't thinking about the fact that they were following the God of the universe. It absolutely blew my mind when I began to see this. And so I decided, I said, God, if this is true, if this is how you are, I want to test you. All throughout the scriptures, God says, Jesus says, test me in regards to money. He says it over and over and over again. So I said, God, every time I'm tempted, because I'm like the disciples, you give me a mission vision, I will give you a budget within 30 seconds. Okay, that's going to take about $25,000. Cashier's check would be preferable. All at once would be best. This is how we work, right? Someone tells you, let's go and do this. You immediately have at least a ballpark budget to give them. Jesus said, you feed them. Oh, that's 8 months of a man's wages, Jesus. This is what we need. We're all very good. So I said, okay, if I am stuck in this same power mentality as the disciples, I have to begin to change my paradigm. So I said, every time I feel tempted to pray for power, I'm going to reframe my request as a petition for authority. Instead of the power to feed my family and clothe my children, I'm going to pray for the authority to be the father and husband you've called me to be. Instead of the power to do this mission trip or go on that project, I'm going to pray for the authority to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth. Now, my whole life, one of the misconceptions we have about maturity in the faith is that the more mature you get, the better you get at explaining why God didn't answer your prayers. Right? I mean, that's a really mature Christian. If they can tell you why he wants your aunt to be sick this week, that's a mature believer. Now, I never see Jesus do this. So I don't think that's the true symbol of maturity. Jesus batted nearly 1,000. And so I know I'm never going to bat 1,000, but my goal is always to up my average. As I get older, I'm always trying to up my average. So as I began praying for authority instead of power, not only was it changing my thinking, but I noticed my average went up. I wasn't batting 1,000, but I was connecting with the ball more often. I was getting on base more often. I learned that praying for power gave me an immediate excuse not to be obedient. God would give me a vision, I'd give him a budget, and then I'd wait. He'd come back, hey, how's that project going? Well, I still don't have the money, God. As I began praying for authority, I began realizing I began to take some first steps, because usually the first steps had nothing to do with money or power. It was about building relationship or laying foundations or other things. And so I would begin taking some steps, putting my foot out the boat, trying to figure some things out. And by the time I got to the place where I needed some power, often God would do something I never even expected. It was when I began praying this way, I began to realize that the truth of the scriptures, when it says, your ways are higher than my ways and your thoughts than my thoughts, I began to understand that I really don't know God at all. I have been conditioned to think of God as my banker. But God isn't a banker, he's a creator. And as I began praying for authority, I began to relate with God as a creator much more intentionally than I ever did as a banker. Because if you look at the way bankers and the way creators problem solve are completely different. A banker will give you a loan. A banker will hire an architecture firm. A banker will build a bridge. A creator will find the most humble person in the crowd, take what they offer, and use that as more than enough for everybody. A creator will calm the sea. A creator will change the law of physics and walk on water. And as this began to slowly change my paradigm and understanding, what does it mean to relate to God as a creator instead of as a banker? And I realized that once I began praying this way, suddenly my vision was growing exponentially. Because when you operate out of a paradigm of power, your vision is really only as big as your bank account and the bank account of your 10 richest friends. Once you begin operating out of a paradigm of authority, you realize God can do whatever he wants. Anything is possible. And the doorway, the entrance into this paradigm shift was learning how to pray for my daily bread. Literally, learning how to pray for my daily bread. I remember the first mission trip I went on where I didn't have enough money to get home. I was praying as I'm driving to the airport to leave my car to fly somewhere. I had a round trip ticket back, but I had a 3-hour drive to the airport, and I had to leave my car in a parking garage, and I didn't have enough money to get out of the parking garage, and I didn't have enough money to put gas in my car to get home. And I had almost no money for food along this trip. And I'm driving to this thing, and I'm realizing, God, wow, for the first time, you can lead me through my stomach. Like, who am I supposed to talk to on this trip? Anyone who offers to feed me. You know? I mean, we look at Paul, you know, and the Holy Spirit forbid him from going into this land, and we think this is some great spiritual connection. Maybe there was just no one welcoming him. And because he was going with nothing, he was dependent upon the hospitality of the people he was going to. And so as I began going through this process, I began realizing that there is so many ways I don't know how to relate to God. Now, how does this relate to justice? Well, injustice, especially systemic injustice, is overwhelming and often leads to hopelessness. If you don't believe me, come to my session after this, because we will look at the systemic racial injustice of the United States of America and of the church for the past 500 years, and I guarantee you it will overwhelm you. Injustice, systemic injustice especially, is overwhelming. And the reason it's overwhelming is because we treat God like a banker. The injustice is rooted in power. It's rooted in unjust systems. It's rooted in all of this money and wealth that has been created for hundreds, even thousands of years. And the thought of trying to turn that boat around is overwhelming. Because we think we have to raise more money. We have to have a stronger army. We have to have more power. But that's not how God works. That's not how the creator of the universe operates. He operates out of authority. Jesus had all power and all authority. Yes, they were both given to him. But when you look closely, he mostly operated out of this dynamic of authority. And that's the exhortation I want to give to you today. And the doorway, the entrance into operating out of authority is learning how to literally pray for your daily bread. Let me close just by reading this prayer one more time. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth just as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Father, we confess that we despise this prayer. We want to protect ourselves from ever being this vulnerable and this poor and this dependent and this needy. And not only do we not want to be there ourselves, but we have no value for the people who are there. We think the poor have nothing to teach us because, look, they have not been blessed by God. That is a lie. If we truly understood your example, Jesus, we would go and sit at the feet of the most impoverished people around the globe that we could ever find, just hoping to scrape a little bit of wisdom out of what you have taught them. Father, we pray that you will help us to gain a value for praying for our daily bread. We pray that you will help us to gain a value for the diversity of your body. We pray that you will help us to gain a value for dependence upon you in very real and practical ways. We pray all of these humbly in the name of Jesus. Amen.
That made sense. Oh yeah.
Every Columbus Day, there is a large ceremony at the statue in front of Union Station. My first year here, I walked out there and I just observed it. And it's a fairly formal event. They have people dressed up in kind of the wares of that time, and they read proclamations given by the president, and they make speeches. And it's a fairly formal event recognizing and honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America. So my first year, I just kind of watched it, and I was fascinated. There were a few protesters, and they were not native, but they were there holding signs, and people were asking questions. And I was there standing by the protesters, and a news agency came up to me and started interviewing me and asking me about what I thought about Columbus Day. And I started going into the doctrine of discovery. And they said, oh, no, we can't broadcast that. We can't cover that. We don't want to hear about that. So last year I went back, and as I was walking up past the statue into the area where they were setting up for the ceremony, I walked past some of the participants who were lining up, holding the flags, and they were going to march around to the front. And as I walked past them, I just, under my breath, said, you know, you can't discover lands already inhabited. And just saying it once felt emboldening to me. So I kept walking, and I walked past a few more people, and a little louder I said to them, you know, you can't discover lands already inhabited. And as I kept walking around the Columbus statue and getting around towards the front, I came around to some people dressed in suits who looked like they were in charge of the event. And fairly loudly I said to them, I said, you know, you cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. And then I walked around and I went to the front, and people were sitting down. The event hadn't started yet, and they were just sitting there, waiting for the event to start. And I turned to them, and I stood in the center, and in a fairly loud voice, I said to them, you know, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing. The fact that to this day we celebrate Columbus as the discoverer of America reveals the implicit racial bias of the nation. Now you can tell when you're speaking when you have the audience's attention, and I knew I had the audience's attention. And they were listening to what I was saying, but immediately as I started speaking, one of the men in the suits came up, and he said to me, "You have to leave." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You are not welcome here. If you do not leave, we're going to have you arrested." Now in my head I'm thinking that would be quite an optic, to have a Native man removed from a Columbus Day ceremony because the statement was, "You are not welcome here." So this year, rather than protesting what they're doing down on Columbus in front of the statue, I thought I will offer an opportunity to provide a counter-narrative, a chance to teach what this history actually is, and to allow the conversation to go a little deeper. And so that's what I'm doing today. That's my goal for the day, and I hope that this will be something that doesn't just happen this year, but will go on, and that there will be a growing trend of teaching the counter-narrative and offering the alternative of the actual history, offering the actual history of what happened around the time of Columbus. And so the title of my presentation today is A Native Perspective on Columbus Day. And to start our presentation, I actually want to begin by acknowledging the people whose land we are standing on. And so if you do your research and look at the lands and the tribes that are originally from this area, you will find references to the Pamunkey, to the Haudenosaunee, and to the Piscataway tribes. These are the tribes that lived here before contact with Europeans, before white settlement. These are the tribes that were removed and that these lands were stolen from. And I like to just, everywhere I go around the country, I like to acknowledge that we are not living on lands that were discovered. There were people here, there were civilizations here, there were tribes and families, and these lands were inhabited, they were not empty. Now this morning, President Trump, actually on Saturday I believe it was, on the 6th, so maybe that's Friday, he released a statement. So every year, the President of the United States releases a proclamation. And if you watch the proclamations during President Obama's administration, he often would not refer directly to the actions of Columbus, but he talked more about some of his spirit. And it still sounded awkward that they were celebrating his determination, his spirit, because of the things that he did. It's kind of like celebrating the spirit and determination of Hitler. He believed something strongly, and he really went for it. Same thing is said of Columbus, but he was trying to make the dialogue a bit more digestible. So on the 6th, President Trump, the White House released this statement, and in his statement he said, 525 years ago, Christopher Columbus completed an ambitious and daring voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. The voyage was a remarkable and then unparalleled feat that helped launch the age of exploration and discovery. The permanent arrival of Europeans to the Americas was a transformative event that undeniably and fundamentally changed the course of human history and set the stage for the development of our great nation. Therefore, on Columbus Day, we honor the skilled navigator and man of faith whose courageous feat brought together continents and have inspired countless others to pursue their dreams and convictions, even in the face of extreme doubt and treacherous adversity. And he goes on for a few more paragraphs, and then he ends by saying, now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim October 9th, 2017 as Columbus Day. So, President Trump is overtly and explicitly celebrating the actions of Columbus. He is celebrating the history, and he states that the permanent arrival of Europeans to the Americas was a transformative event that set the stage for the development of our great nation. His statement made it even more apparent that our country needs to teach its history properly. We need to understand what happened and how this took place. We need to understand how we got to where we are today. I often tell people that that you cannot understand American history without first understanding the history of the church. The history of the church, for all that we talk about the separation of church and state, there is actually a deep theological union between the church and the state that to this day is pretty much inseparable. And so if you really want to understand the history of America, you have to first understand the history of the church. And I like to go all the way back to the time of Jesus. When Jesus walked the face of the earth, he actually was very adamant that he was not coming as a political Messiah. He was adamant that he was not here to set up a religious imperial institution. He was here to make disciples. He was here to plant a church. He was here to offer his body as a living sacrifice. He was here to pour out grace, mercy, love, and healing upon the people of the world. I love the story in Luke chapter 7 where John the Baptist is so confused by Jesus because Jesus had just raised the son of a widow from the dead and had healed the servant of a centurion, a Roman army guard. And John was so confused by this that he sent his disciples to Jesus and asked, "Are you the one we're expecting, or should we look for somebody else?" And Jesus, I love his response because he turned and he healed more sick people. He cast out more demons. He gave sight to more of the blind. He gave hearing to more of the deaf. He helped those who were hurting and who were the least. And then he turned to John's disciples and said, "Go back and tell your master what you've seen. And blessed is the man who does not stumble on account of him." Jesus was adamant, I am not here to set up a religious institution. I'm not here to set up a religious political system. I am here to pour out mercy and love and to help people. When he was before Pilate, and Pilate said, "Don't you know I can set you free?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom's not of this earth. If my kingdom were from here, my servants, the angels, would rise up and set me free. My kingdom is somewhere else." Jesus was adamant his kingdom was not here on earth. And so when you joined the church in the first century, you knew that by your membership in the church, you were standing in opposition to the empire. You joined the church through your baptism, your confession, your discipleship, and through your community. And when you joined the church, you knew there was a good chance you would be persecuted and probably even killed by the empire. Now, in the 3rd century, this began to change. And Constantine became emperor of Rome. And while he was emperor, he became a Christian. And he and his mother decided to Christianize Rome, to create Christendom, a Christian earthly kingdom. Now, this is in direct contrast to the teachings of Jesus. Jesus said, "My kingdom's not of this earth," and Constantine set up a earthly kingdom for Christ, Christendom. By setting up this Christian empire, he was fundamentally changing what it meant to be the church. Now, instead of joining the church through your baptism, your discipleship, your confession, and your community, now you became a member of the church because of your membership, your citizenship in the empire. Now, this created a dilemma for the theologians of the day, because Jesus' teachings were in direct contrast to the values of the empire. The empire was protecting itself, expanding its borders through the act of warfare. Jesus said things like, "Love your enemies, turn the other cheek, pray for those who persecuted you." Theologically, it was very difficult for Christian citizens of a Christian empire to go off and fight the bloody wars and battles of the empire. So the theologians of the day began to tackle this theological problem, and St. Augustine developed what's called a just war theory. Now, one of the roles of the just war theory was to justify how the Christian citizens of a Christian nation, Christian empire, could go off and fight the bloody, violent battles of the empire. It wasn't just about only fighting just wars. It was, how do we justify Christian people ignoring the teachings of Jesus and participating in these bloody battles? Now, in his writings, St. Augustine is very clear that the Christian empire is not the city of God. But he also seems to acknowledge that, but it's better than being persecuted. So he colludes with it. How can we make Christian empire work? Now, the fact that he wrote a just war theory is evidence that he's colluding with empire. But I wanted to find the smoking gun. You know, when Jesus has people who collude with empire, when Peter says to Jesus, "You don't have to die there's a better way, what does Jesus do? How does he respond? Get behind me, Satan. You're not on the side of God, but of men. Jesus reacts very violently, very aggressively when people try to collude with empire. When the disciples say to Jesus that they're coming out of Samaria, and they have been rejected by the Samaritans, and they say, shall we call down fire from heaven and destroy them? And Jesus rebukes them. No, that's not what we're doing. We're doing something else. And so I was looking for the quote from St. Augustine where when Jesus said it, when St. Augustine said it, Jesus would turn and say, get behind me, Satan. You're not on the side of man, but of God. Now I looked for over a year for this quote. I couldn't find it in his writings on just war, and I couldn't find it in his writings on the two kingdoms. But about 4 or 5 months ago, I was reading some more and looking up, and I found a book he had written on the correction of the Donatists. Now, the Donatists are a schism group. They're teaching heresy. They're leading people astray from the church. And Augustine is wrestling what to do with them. And in this book, in chapter 5, he's debating what is the role of a Christian king in a Christian empire. And he concludes that the role of the king is to serve the Lord by preventing and chastising with religious severity all those acts which are done in opposition to the commandments of the Lord. He then goes on to state that he serves him by enforcing with suitable rigor such laws as ordain what is righteous and punish what is the reverse. So Augustine is arguing that the role of a Christian king in a Christian empire is to use the resources of the state to enforce with suitable rigor the commands of God, i.e. the doctrines of the church. In chapter 6, he goes on and he says, while it is better that people worship God through sound teaching, if they are not compelled by sound teaching, if they don't accept the sound teaching, it is okay to use that they should be driven to it by fear of punishment and pain. For many, he said, have found advantage in first being compelled by fear or pain, so that they might afterwards be influenced by teaching. So Augustine is concluding that the role of a Christian king in a Christian nation is to use the resources of the state through fear, punishment, and pain to compel unbelievers to worship. He is completely outside the lines here. I have no doubt Jesus would turn to Augustine and say, get behind me, Satan. You are not on the side of man, of God, but of men. Augustine is completely off the rails here. He doesn't get it. He's colluding with empire. Over the centuries, this teaching morphs into what's become the Crusades. The Crusades are about expanding the empire as well as protecting Jerusalem. And then in the 12th century, Thomas Aquinas, another theologian of that period, he is also wrestling of what do we do with heretics? How do we handle heretics in the church? And he argues that if the secular state can kill people, put them to death because they break man's laws, how much more is it permissible? For it is a much greater matter to corrupt the faith which quickens the soul than to forge money which supports temporal life. So how much more reason is there for heretics, as soon as they are convicted of heresy, to not only be excommunicated, but even put to death? So now Thomas Aquinas, a theologian, is arguing that the church has the right to put people to death who are not following God. In the 13th century, the popes, the writers of the papal bulls, began to introduce a new term in their writings. It's called the infidel. This is a subhuman category. It's primarily applied to the Moors or to the Muslims. Later it's applied to indigenous peoples. Anyone who doesn't follow the white Christian God of European nations. And now that we have this category of infidel, this subhuman category, now the justification for wars change. Now instead of needing a just war theory, now you can go to battle based on your theological grounds. You're fighting the other. You're fighting the enemies of Christ. So even the justification for war changes at this time. So this leads to the writers of the papal bulls. This is Pope Nicholas V in 1452, who writes, invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. Reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Convert them to his and to their use and profit. This papal bull along with other papal bulls written between 1452 and 1493, collectively become known as what we call the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is essentially the church in Europe saying to the nations of Europe, wherever you go, whatever lands you find not ruled by white European Christian rulers, those people are less than human, and the land is yours for the taking. This is literally the doctrine that let European nations go into Africa, colonize the continent, and enslave the African people. They didn't believe them to be human. This is the same doctrine that let Columbus, who was lost at sea, land in this new world, already inhabited by millions, and claim to have discovered it. If we look closely at the writings of the papal bulls with Pope Alexander VI in 1493 in a papal bull, he was actually going back and kind of addressing what Columbus had done the year before, which is discovered this new world. And in his writings, he says, should any of the said islands that have been found by your envoys and captains give, grant, and assign to you and your heirs successors? He goes on, all islands and mainlands found and to be found, discovered and to be discovered. And in the islands and countries already discovered are found gold, spices, and very many other precious things of diverse kinds and quantities. You have proposed by the favor of divine clemency to bring under your sway the said mainlands and islands with their residents and inhabitants, and to bring them to the Catholic faith. He goes on to say, and we make, appoint, and depute you and your said heirs and successors, lords of them, with full and free power, authority, jurisdiction of every kind, in order to instruct the aforesaid inhabitants and residents of the Catholic faith and train them in good morals. So he is giving Columbus authority, the right of discovery, the power over all lands discovered and yet to be discovered, found and yet to be found, and all of the resources and inhabitants and people found within them. Columbus now has the authority of the church to teach them good morals and has control over these lands. Now remember what it means from both Augustine and Aquinas to teach good morals. Remember what you are allowed to do if people do not follow your teachings. So now we need to look at, there's a historian from that same time period. He was from Spain. He was actually living in the New World. He was a friar, and some called him the protector of the Indians. But I'm not going to pronounce his name right, but Bartolomé de las Casas. And he was living between 1484 and 1566, and he wrote a book called A Short Account of the Destruction of the Indies. And in his book, he kind of records what happened and what was going on in this place. And he writes that 49 years have passed since the first settlers penetrated the land, the first so claimed being the large and most happy isle called Hispaniola. Now, he actually documents that these people led very peaceful and loving lives, as he goes on in his book. But it says some of the Indians concealed their foods, while others concealed their wives and children, so others fled to the mountains to avoid the terrible transactions of the Christians, and the Christians attacked them with buffet and beatings, with such temerity and shamelessness that the most powerful ruler of the island had to see his own wife raped by Christian officers. He goes on to record that the Spaniards perpetuated the same acts of aggression against the islands and the wicked deeds described above, adding to the many outstanding cruelties, massacres, and burnings of the people, are executing them by flinging them to the fierce dogs, torturing and oppressing the survivors, condemning them to the hard labor of mines, thus eradicating them from the earth. Before the arrival of the Spaniards, there had lived on these islands more than 600,000 souls, and now in each of the two islands there are not more than 200 persons remaining. We just have to be clear. The doctrine of discovery, the legacy of discovery by Christopher Columbus, and the prostitution of the church to the empire are systemically dehumanizing and racist events that have nothing to do with the teachings of Christ and are merely about the exploitation and dehumanizing of the natural resources and indigenous peoples. Now, the challenge with the doctrine of discovery is that it's been embedded into the foundations of the country. So in 1763, King George drew a line down the Appalachian Mountains. And he said to the colonies that they no longer had the right of discovery of the empty Indian lands west of Appalachia. Well, this upset the colonists. They wanted access to those lands. So a few years later, they wrote a letter of protest. In their letter, they accused the king of raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. They went on in their letter to state that he has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages. 30 lines below the statement, all men are created equal, the Declaration of Independence refers to natives as merciless Indian savages, making it very clear the only reason the Founding Fathers used this inclusive term, all men, is because they had a very narrow definition of who was actually human. This, of course, and the legacy of the doctrine of discovery, this makes the Declaration of Independence a systemically racist document that assumes the dehumanization of indigenous peoples and people of color. Now, a few years later, our Founding Fathers set up and wrote another document. They began this document with the words, "We the people of the United States," in order to form a more perfect union. This, of course, is the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. However, just a few lines later, Article 1, Section 2 of this Constitution, the section that determines who is and who is not a citizen of this union, who is and who is not protected by this Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, first we have to note it never mentions women. Now, this is important because if you actually read the Constitution, beginning with the preamble all the way through the last amendment, you will note that there are 52 gender-specific male pronouns, and not a single female pronoun used throughout the entire document. So we have to note that Article 1, Section 2 never mentions women. Second, it specifically excludes natives. And third, it counts Africans as 3/5 of a person. So who's left? White landowning men of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to white landowning men and white landowning men's prosperity, do establish and ordain this Constitution of the United States. The purpose of the Constitution is to protect the interests of white landowning men. So today we act surprised that women earn 70 cents to the dollar. This should not surprise us. The Constitution's working. We act surprised that our prisons are filled with people of color. This should not surprise us. The Constitution's working. We act appalled that in 2010, the Supreme Court sides with Citizens United and rules that corporations now have the same rights to political free speech as individuals. This should not shock us. The Constitution is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's protecting the interests of white landowning men. Now maybe you think, wait, we corrected that, right? Well, we tried. So, several years later, we passed the 13th Amendment. What does the 13th Amendment do? Well, many think it abolishes slavery. This is what we think the 13th Amendment says. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This isn't what it says. This is actually what the 13th Amendment says, which is slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So did we abolish slavery? No. Where's it legal? Prison. Well, let's look at our incarceration rates. Shouldn't surprise anyone that we incarcerate our citizens at the highest rate of any nation in the world. For every 100,000 of our citizens, we incarcerate 693 of them. It's 110 higher than the next country, which is Turkmenistan at 583, and about 5 times higher than most other countries in the world. This chart just compares us to the NATO nations, and you can see the discrepancy. And when we break it out by race, it's even worse. Hispanic Latino Americans get incarcerated rate of 531, or 831. American Indians are incarcerated at a rate of 895, and African Americans, black people, are incarcerated at a rate of 2,306. Now, a few years ago, there was a statement made that said there are more African Americans in prison, jail, on probation, or parole than were enslaved in 1850. According to the 2013 Bureau of Justice Statistics, we had 526 African Americans serving time in state and federal correctional facilities, 877,000 men on probation, 280 male parolees, for a total of 1.68 million black men under the supervision of the criminal justice system. That is about 810,000 more than we had enslaved in 1850. So just to be clear, we have never abolished slavery. And today we still use it as a completely legal way of enslaving our people of color. Now, a few years later, we passed another document, another amendment. This was the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment extends the right of citizenship to anyone born on this continent under the jurisdiction of the government. However, Section 2 of this Constitution, of this amendment, first we have to note it still explicitly excludes natives, and it still explicitly excludes women. Second, it makes citizenship, the rights to citizenship, still based on not being under the supervision of the criminal justice system. So while this amendment extends some rights of citizenship temporarily to a few former male slaves, it still leaves marginalized, disenfranchised, huge segments of the population. And we forget that it was after this amendment that we still constructed Indian boarding schools. We still passed Jim Crow laws. We still had segregation. We still had internment camps. We still had Indian removal. And in 1970, this very same amendment was used in Roe versus Wade, which now concluded unborn babies aren't human, and therefore they can be aborted. What this demonstrates is that, based on the legacy of discovery and the doctrine of discovery, the United States Constitution is a systemically racist and sexist document that assumes the white landowning male has the authority to determine who is and who is not human. So, in 1823, we had a Supreme Court case. This was Johnson versus McIntosh. It's 2 men of European descent. They're litigating over a single piece of land. One of them got the land from a native tribe. The other one got the same piece of land from the government. They want to know who owned it. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, right down the road. The court had to decide the principle that land titles were based on. They determined that the principle for land titles was that discovery gave title to the government by whose subject or by whose authority it was made against all other European governments, and that title was consummated by possession. They then go on to reference the doctrine of discovery and use that to determine that natives who were here first but are less than human, we only have the right of occupancy to the land, what's known as aboriginal title. This is like a bird occupies air or a fish occupies water. And Europeans have the right of discovery and therefore the fee title to the land, and therefore they are the true title holders. Now this case, along with a few others during the Marshall Court era, created a legal precedent for land titles. So today, if the Piscataway, the Haudenosaunee came back and said, we want our land back, and they sued the U.S. government, we want our land back, the government wouldn't say, no, we have a treaty with you, because they broke that treaty. The government wouldn't say, no, we conquered you, because then the government would lose its moral authority. It was a conquesting, dehumanizing colonial government, and it would no longer have moral authority. So what they would do is they would go back to this 1823 Supreme Court case, and they would say, oh, look, according to the doctrine of discovery, you are less than human and only have aboriginal title to the land, while Europeans have the fee title to the land, and therefore we are the true title holders. How do I know this would happen? Because this is what happened in 1954, it's what happened in 1985, and it's again what happened in 2005. 3 times where the United States Supreme Court referenced the doctrine of discovery and used it as a legal instrument in legal proceedings with Native Americans. So this, of course, makes the United States Supreme Court, in the legacy of the doctrine of discovery and our history of discovery, a systemically racist court that assumes the dehumanization of indigenous peoples and people of color. Now, initially, the Protestant church pushed back against the doctrine of discovery. This was a Catholic doctrine. They didn't fully buy into it. But remember, if you want to understand the history of America, you have to understand the history of the church. So in 1630, John Winthrop, a Protestant pastor, was in what we call today now the Boston Harbor. He was with a group of people here to settle the Boston, to plant the Boston colony. In this boat, in this ship, he preached a sermon called A Model of Christian Charity. In his sermon, he compared the colonists he was with to a city on a hill. He's borrowing from the image of Jesus, using the Sermon on the Mount, where he tells his disciples, be a lamp on a stand, a city on the hill, shining your good deeds into this dark world. He goes on in his sermon to exhort them in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and morality, to rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, to keep the unity of the Spirit within the bonds of peace. These are just your average Christian exhortations. However, at the end of his sermon, John Winthrop is trying to compel his listeners to obey what he's saying. And so he begins quoting from Deuteronomy chapter 30. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 30 is the passage in the Old Testament where the people of Israel are standing at the banks of the Jordan River, ready to cross over and take possession of their promised lands. And God's reiterating the threats and promises of his land covenant to them. If you obey me, I'll do these things for you. If you disobey me, I'll do these things to you. Now, in this passage, it says, but if our hearts shall turn away so that we will not obey, and we worship other gods, we shall surely perish out of the good land whether we pass over this river to possess it. Now, Deuteronomy 30 says river. But in his sermon, John Winthrop, quoting this passage, changes river to vast sea. Why would he do that? Well, they didn't cross the river, they crossed an ocean. So what's he implying? Based on all Old Testament Israel, they are here to take possession of their promised lands. Now, if you read the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Joshua, how does God tell Israel to take possession of Canaan? What do they do to the Canaanites? Kill them. Leave no man, no woman, no child, no animal left alive. Promised lands for one people is literally God-ordained genocide for another. I call this sermon the birth of American exceptionalism. This idea percolates for about 100 years. Mid-1700s, we go past the Appalachian Mountains, we start expanding westward, we go past the Mississippi River. End of the 1700s, we have the Second Great Awakening. There's a growth in churches, a renewal of denominations. There's this religious fervor as we go further and further west. And early 1800s, the term manifest destiny is coined. This belief that this nation has the God-given right to rule this continent from sea to shining sea. So now that we have a systemically racist doctrine of discovery, a racist Declaration of Independence, a racist and sexist Constitution, a racist Supreme Court, and a God-given right to commit genocide, now we have a bit more history we have to talk about. Why don't you think about the 19th century? This chart shows the history of our nation from 1775 to 2016. Every year in blue is the year that I found we were in a declared state of war or armed military conflict against another nation or entity. Every year in red is the year I found we were fighting native tribes. The list below is just the battles I found primarily during the 19th century that we fought against native peoples. Now this is the century, if you look from 1811 to 1886, we had almost 75 straight years of warfare against native peoples. This is the century that our history books refer to as our century of expansion. we added 30 new states to the Union during this century. Well, clearly this is an expansion. This is ethnic cleansing and genocide. It was during this century that we passed the Indian Removal Act. This was the act of Congress signed by Andrew Jackson that in practice gave the U.S. military the right by force to remove tribes from the lands in the east to empty lands in the west. This resulted in the Trail of Tears for the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Cherokee. This resulted in the Long Walk for the Navajo and the Pueblo. All told, about a dozen tribes experienced forced relocation, and tens of thousands of people died as a direct result of this act. In 1862, we had the largest mass execution in the history of our nation. The day after Christmas, 1862, hundreds of white settlers came out and sung hymns of praise, while 38 Dakota warriors were hung after military tribunals lasting a mere minutes for each of them. This execution was ordered by President Abraham Lincoln. In 1864, we had the massacre at Sand Creek. We had about 150, 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho men, women, and children. They were encamped over a hillside in Colorado. A U.S. Army led by a Methodist pastor comes over the hill. They're waving a white flag of surrender and an American flag to show that they're peacefully, and he orders all of them slaughtered. It's later reported that the U.S. soldiers were parading their genitalia down the streets of Denver. In 1879, we had the start of Indian boarding schools with the founding of the Carlisle Indian School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, not too far from here. The stated goal of these schools was to kill the Indian to save the man. Native children were taken from their homes. They were raised in military-style boarding schools. They were punished for speaking their languages. They were punished for practicing their culture. The stories of abuse, mental, sexual, physical, emotional, that happen in these boarding schools is heart-wrenching. The last of these schools that were run by the government and churches didn't close until the 1970s and 80s. In 1890, we had a bit more famous battle. We teach this some in our history books. This is the massacre at Wounded Knee. 350 natives were slaughtered in a single day at Wounded Knee. As I said, we teach this a bit more. What we don't talk about, though, is that the United States Congress awarded 20 Congressional Medals of Honor to U.S. soldiers who participated in this massacre. There have been numerous efforts to have these medals rescinded because these can easily be seen as a war crime. They've all failed. I actually found a quote by John McCain in the UK in a newspaper arguing against rescinding these medals. This is what our country looked like in 1840. The dark states to the east are the actual states. The lighter states to the west are territories or unsettled lands. On the U.S. military's website, there is a page you can go to where you can look up by war and conflict the Congressional Medals of Honor awarded to U.S. soldiers. On that page, if you look under Indian Wars, beginning in 1839 and ending in 1898, the United States Congress awarded 425 Congressional Medals of Honor to U.S. soldiers who participated in the Indian Wars. And this is what our country looked like in 1900. During that same period of time, the dominant population ballooned from about 5.3 million to 76.2 million. The native population shrank from 600,000 to about 250,000. So we just have to be clear. Between 1839 and 1898, the United States Congress awarded 425 Congressional Medals of Honor for the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Native peoples across this continent. On December 19, 2009, Congress passed House Resolution 3326. This was a 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Act. It's a 67-page bill laying out the appropriations for the DoD for 2010. Page 45, subsection 8113 is titled Apology to Native Peoples of the United States. What follows is the 7-bullet point apology. It mentions no specific tribe, no specific treaty, and no specific injustice. It basically says you had some nice land, our citizens didn't take it very politely, let's just call this all of our land and steward it together. And it ends with a disclaimer saying nothing in here is legally binding. To date, this apology has not been announced, read, or publicized by the White House or by Congress. As I was saying earlier, we don't teach a history of America, we teach a mythology. The mythology of America is that we have a legacy of discovery, that we believe in equality, that we have a history of expansion, that we're exceptional, and that liberty and justice here is for everyone, and that we are a Christian nation. But this mythology runs very, very deep. Who here has been to the Lincoln Memorial? Okay, keep your hands up. Who here has been to the museum at the base of the memorial? So at the base of the memorial, there's a small museum. It's a bit smaller than this room. On each wall, a little bit smaller than these windows over here, there are plaques. They have quotes, statements, writings by President Lincoln about different aspects of the country and his legacy. In the middle of one wall, the wall that talks about his thoughts on the Union, there's this plaque that says, "I will save the Union. My paramount object in this struggle," says Abraham Lincoln, "is to save the Union. It is not to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." There's a plaque hanging at the Lincoln Memorial. One of the safest places for people of color in this country. Countless speeches, rallies have been held there for people of color and by people of color. And there is a plaque hanging at the Lincoln Memorial that literally states, according to Abraham Lincoln, black lives don't matter. I don't know what's more offensive, the fact that he said it or that someone thought it was appropriate to hang that. So we don't teach a history of our country, we teach a mythology. Discovery is a code word for dehumanization. Equality exists only for a select few. Expansion is our code word for ethnic cleansing. Exceptionalism is our coping mechanism for our history of genocide. The liberty and justice we love to talk about exists primarily for white landowning men, and we are not a Christian nation. There is no such thing as a Christian nation. We are the next embodiment of what is known as the heretical institution of Christendom. Christendom has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus and is merely about establishing a religious imperial power on earth. Now maybe you're thinking, well, that's a little strong, Mr. Charles. I want you to think back to last summer, June of 2017. There was a terrorist attack in London. The same day as that attack, U.S. Congressman Clay Higgins, he represents the 3rd District in Louisiana. His website states that he has a refreshing focus on the power of the individual to be redeemed. He's a Christian. June 4th, Representative Clay Higgins, the day of the terrorist attack, on his website, on his public Facebook page, posted this: "The free world, all of Christendom, is at war with Islamic horror. Not a single penny of American treasure should be granted to any nation who harbors these heathen animals. Not a single ratified Islamic suspect should be granted any measure of order. Their intended entry to the American homeland should be summarily denied. Every conceivable measure should be engaged to hunt them down, hunt them, identify them, and kill them all. For the sake of all that is good and righteous, kill them all." U.S. Congressman Clay Higgins, June 4th, 2017. Christendom is alive and well. It's built on the legacy of discovery. It assumes the dehumanization of the other, and it is a violent and genocidal entity, and we are citizens of it. Now I want to just pause for a moment here. There's no good or bad answer, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to emote with me. Tell me how you're feeling. How does this history make you feel? 2 or 3 words. We don't need the whole full story, just 2 or 3 words. There's no good or bad answer. There's no right or wrong answer. Just email it to me. How does this history make you feel? Paul.
Sickened as a Christian.
Sickened.
Yes.
Lied to.
Deceived.
Deceived. Despondent. Yeah. Yeah, this is difficult to swallow. I know I laid out a ton of history on you in the past 50 minutes. I want to end with one thought. There's an Aboriginal leader. His name is George Erasmus. And George Erasmus says that where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. If you want to build community, he says you have to start by creating a common memory. I think this quote gets to the heart of our nation's problem with race. We don't have a common memory. We have a dominant culture that remembers a history of discovery, expansion, opportunity, and exceptionalism. And we have communities of color that have the lived experience of stolen lands, broken treaties, slavery, removal, ethnic cleansing, genocide, Jim Crow laws, segregation, internment camps, boarding schools, mass incarceration, and there's no common memory. I'm convinced this is what we need to do. And this is the purpose why I actually am giving this lecture. This is the purpose of my work. This is why I'm traveling around the country, because I'm convinced we need a common memory. I believe that the United States of America needs a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. A dialogue on par with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that took place in South Africa, Rwanda, and Canada. Now, they called their dialogues Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. I like this sentiment, I like the idea of it, but the reconciliation, one of the primary reconciliations we're looking at here is around the issue of race. So you all have heard of the term racial reconciliation, correct? Many churches, many social justice organizations use this term to talk about what we need between the races. Well, this is a beautiful word, and it has some lovely feelings around it, but in regards to race in America, this term is a misnomer. It's not accurate. First of all, race is a human construct. There's no genetic definition of race. The black race in America was constructed through what's known as the one-drop rule. What's the one-drop rule? Well, it states if you have a single drop of African blood, you're black. Why do we have this rule? Well, blacks were the labor force. They were the slaves. Founding fathers, the nation wanted as many black people as possible. The one-drop rule allowed a white slave owner to rape his female slaves and produce more baby slaves. This is how we constructed the African American race, the black race. The American Indian race was constructed through what's called the blood quantum rule. What's the blood quantum rule? Well, the blood quantum rule states you're full, you're half, you're a quarter, you're an eighth, you're 16th, then you're 32nd, then you're bred out of existence. Why do we have this rule? Well, the legacy of America is that we discovered this land that was empty. We have treaty obligations to Native peoples. We want as few of them as possible. So the American Indian race was constructed for the purpose of breeding us out of existence. So race is a human construct, and in America it was constructed for the express purpose of oppressing and dividing. Now, reconciliation refers to a previous harmony. Well, clearly that never existed. Racial reconciliation, while it sounds beautiful, is a misnomer. It's not accurate. I prefer to use the term racial conciliation. Conciliation is the mediation of a dispute. Like reconciliation, it can lead to a better place, but it has a more honest starting point. Racial reconciliation perpetuates the myth of America. We used to be great, and now we're not. Racial conciliation requires a more honest starting point. This thing started out in a mess. We're just trying to make it better. So we don't need a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need a National Truth and Conciliation Commission. And this is what I'm doing. I am traveling the country almost on a weekly basis, talking to audiences, trying to persuade our nation that we need a national dialogue on race, gender, and class, on par with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that happened in South Africa, Rwanda, and Canada. I call it truth and conciliation, and I am convinced we need it sooner rather than later. I am hoping to have one by 2021. On my website, there are many resources, articles, videos, audio files that I've published and put out regarding this history, regarding this vision, and trying to make this call as far and as wide and as broad as possible. I would love to educate our political leaders on this process, and I would love to educate all of our citizens on this process. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I want to thank everyone who joined us online. And I invite you into this journey to create a common ground, to listen to the wisdom of the elders of the indigenous peoples of this land. Because where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same passion, we know the community. If we want to build community, we need to start by creating a common memory. Thank you very much for coming today. It's been my honor to speak with you. Have a good day, everybody.
Nice. Now that's what I'm talking about. You see, if you were watching it from the start, you would see Mark Charles going over the history of Christianity and how it came to bring forth this law of discovery, where they set up a Christendom rather against what Christianity's hero or God or Son of God or messenger had stated that he's not there to bring forth a Christendom. That was not it. But as we see in this, it explains that instead what happened was the governments back then and the church joined together in cahoots to force this Christendom into existence, which had nothing to do with women. It had nothing to do with anyone of color. It had nothing to do with anything except for upholding white Christian European men as the rulers, the overlords, the landlords of anywhere that they go, regardless of any other factor. Imagine that. The doctrine of discovery. And I mean, we see it clear today, right? They keep adding more and more laws so that they can enslave the public, so that they can keep their Christendom alive and well. that only benefits politicians and the 1% of the rich people on the planet. And the church. The church as a business, not as an entity trying to bring forth the word of their Savior, but the church as a power and a power business structure. Which is why you see a lot of churches that have that pay no taxes. They're exempt from every form of tax because they're in cahoots with the government to control the population, to brainwash the population into believing these lies. Interesting. To make it acceptable and okay to have slaves, to treat black people as 1/3 of a human, to completely forget about indigenous people and completely forget about women. Interesting. Interesting. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Excuse me.
Your spirit animal. Watch this video to find out what the meaning of indigenous spirit animal. What is a spirit animal and how do you, what is a
I heard a minister say that those kind of church people should be called heretics. Didn't think much of the institutional church. You actually heard one that talked about the institutional church and should be called heretics. You didn't think much of the institutional church. Mag, how you doing, Mag? Well, it's true. And we just watched how true and how the government and institutional churches literally coerce with each other to create the most genocidal acts, the most racist acts, the most egregious acts towards even their own God and Savior's belief to do what we have today. Interesting. If there's any of the people on the right that are watching this, I hope you learned something. I hope you actually got an education.
spirit animal, and how do you find your spirit animal? Watch this video to find out what the meaning of indigenous spirit animals are and how you can find yours. I'm Mallory Graham, Anishinaabe from tribaltradeco.com. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for new videos every week on smudging, the indigenous culture, and native teachings. Have you ever wondered what your spirit animal is? Or have you ever felt drawn to a specific animal without being able to explain why? We've helped thousands of people understand and practice spiritual wellness through indigenous teachings, smudging, and New World teachings. Many people have asked us about spirit animals and how you go about finding yours. So watch this video right to the end so that you can learn about the significance of spirit animals and how you go about finding yours and what it means. Spirit animals, or also known as spirit animal guides, has very different meanings to different tribes and nations in the indigenous culture. But most often, the spirit animal is a teacher or a messenger that comes to us in the form of an animal. Native American spirit animals hold a very sacred place in First Nations and tribal culture. The first thing to know about finding your spirit animal is to first understand what a spirit animal is in the first place. Within any tribe, spirituality can take many forms, but it often speaks to the spiritual connection to the spirits around you and to yourself. The spirit animal enhances this connection by teaching us different lessons about ourselves and our environment. Traditionally, it is believed that we do not choose our spirit animal. Our spirit animal chooses us. The second point to know about finding your spirit animal is to know which spirit animal to choose. But like I said in the first part, many traditional teachings have told us that it is said that our spirit animals choose us. So we don't actually choose our own spirit animal. It's not up to us. The Creator sends the spirit animal that is meant for us and then chooses us. This creates a bond and allows our spirit animal to offer healing or medicine in the form of guidance, protection, power, or wisdom. I've also been told that we are not limited to one spirit animal in a lifetime. We can have multiple spirit animals come in and out of our lives, each providing us with unique knowledge and gifts when we need them most. Have you ever felt a connection with a certain animal? Please share with us in the comments below. The third point to know about how to find your spirit animal is actually choosing or being chosen by your spirit animal. If you hope to find your spirit animal, then all you need to do is ask for that spirit animal to present itself to you. Spirit animal meanings vary and are extremely unique to each individual. When you're going about seeking what your spirit animal is, there are some questions that you can ask yourself. Have you ever felt drawn to a certain animal? Or have you ever had a favorite animal without being able to explain why? Does a certain kind of animal consistently or repeatedly show up in your life, either physically or in symbols or in dreams? Are you frightened of a specific animal? Or are you puzzled by a particular animal? If a specific animal comes to mind when you are answering these questions, this spirit animal might be trying to tell you something. One good thing to do is allow your spirit animal to come to you during meditation or some other state of altered consciousness. You can also try journaling about your past and present, things that are important to you and your core values. Your spirit animal should become clearer as you consider the depths of what makes you who you are. Now, the fourth thing you want to do when finding what your spirit animal is to understand the meaning behind that spirit animal. In many Native American tribes and nations, animal totems, or clans is what we call them in First Nations communities, can serve as a reminder of our spirit animals. Animal totems are deeply sacred and can be passed down for generations. But even without a totem, it is possible to to be touched by your spirit animal in many ways. You might see it on a hike, pass a portrait in a gallery, or hear it sung about in your favorite song. You can use these encounters as a unique reminder of who you are and that your spirit animal is with you on your journey. Is your spirit animal the otter, playful, agile, and loyal, or the turtle, wise and truthful? Only time, patience, and careful understanding can open the connection to your spirit animal guide. Now, after learning these 4 ways to know how to find and connect with your spirit animal, you can now open the connection with your spirit animal with time, patience, and careful understanding. If you like this video, please let us know by hitting the like button. Tell us what you liked about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. You have 1 or more rooms in your house that you want to cleanse, purify, or smudge to get rid of any of the negative energy and replace it with positive energy. But you're not 100% confident on how to smudge or that you're following the right steps. Using sage to create a purely positive space in your home. Watch this video to find out how to smudge or purify a room or your whole house with one of the sacred medicines. Or for this video, using sage. I'm Mallory Graham from tribaltradeco.com, where we offer over 130 different styles of moccasins and mucklucks, as well as medicinal smudging products. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified every time we post a brand new video just like this one on Indigenous moccasins, culture, sacred medicines, and lifestyle products. If you are looking to purify 1 or more rooms in your house through the use of smudging with sage specifically, then we're here to help you through this 5-step process of preparing, smudging, and cleansing your house the correct way so that you're allowing the positive energy to flow around your sacred space. We've helped thousands of people find sacred medicines that are just right for them and their unique needs, as well as how to smudge themselves, others, and their homes. And now it's your turn. By the end of this video, you will know how to correctly prepare, smudge, and cleanse your home. People smudge for many different reasons. It might be part of their daily routine, they could have a specific space that they want to purify, or it's part of a ceremony to purify their mind, body, and spirit for clear communication with the Creator. For the purposes of this video, you might have a specific room or your entire house that you want to cleanse. If there's possible negative energy that you want transformed into positive energy. For me personally, any time that I have moved to a new apartment or a new house, I will smudge the entire space or the entire house. Or when there has been a passing, a loss of life, or a traumatic experience, smudging can help purify and cleanse the space around you on a spiritual level. It's very important to note that various indigenous tribes around North America, even around the world, practice smudging. This smudging practice specifically has been taught to me by elders in my Anishinaabe, Ojibwe community of Curve Lake First Nation. Different tribes have slightly different rules or processes around smudging, and one is not right or wrong or better than any other. What is important is your intention to do good with your smudging practices and to be open and positive to what other people's beliefs are. Now let's get into it. There is an important 5-step process in properly smudging that we'll take you through to make sure that you feel the most confident as possible when you are smudging your room or your entire house. The first step in the process of smudging your house is to prepare your smudge with a bundle. The ingredients for smudging can be called your smudge kit, your medicine bag, your bundle, or whatever you'd like to call it. Smudging bundle typically includes an abalone shell, or you could substitute this with a clay, copper, or metal bowl of some sort, matches to light your sacred medicines, tobacco, plus your choice of smudging medicine. This could be sage, cedar, or sweetgrass, and an eagle feather to waft the smoke from the burning medicine. If you don't have an eagle feather, another feather is okay, or you can just use your hand. The second step in the process of smudging your house is to light the medicine. Once you've lit your match, set flame to your sage and place it in the bowl. The bowl is used to 1. Contain the burning sacred medicine, 2. To make sure that you don't damage anything or burn yourself, and 3. To contain the heat so that your burning medicine doesn't go out. Allow your sage to burn naturally. Don't blow on the flame to make it burn more. Instead, use the eagle feather to spread the flame around the medicine to ensure there's lots of smoke rising up and around the space. Before you move on to the third step, smudge the eagle feather to cleanse it. Once the medicine has created enough smoke to spread using the feather or your hand, you can move on to step number 3. Do you guys prefer to smudge with sage, cedar, or another sacred medicine? Please share with us in the comments below. Now we've looked at the first 2 steps for smudging your home with sage, which is 1. To prepare your smudge with a smudge kit or bundle, and 2. To light your sage and place it inside your bowl. The third step in the process of smudging your house is to fan the smoke toward you to allow its medicine to cleanse and purify everything it touches. When you are fanning the smoke, you follow a process in itself, starting with your head. You begin with smudging your head so that you have only good thoughts, followed by your eyes to help create clear vision, and you look for only the good in everything. Then you smudge your mouth to say only positive things. Address your heart next to create positive emotions, love, and kindness. Finally, smudge the rest of your body for good health and wisdom. After you've finished smudging yourself, the fourth step in the process of smudging your house is to fan the smoke around the room. Allow the smoke to touch everything in the room, including objects and furniture, to ensure each area is cleansed with the sage or the other sacred medicine that you're using. If you're smudging your entire house, it doesn't really matter which room that you start with. Make sure that you're being thorough, going from room to room. Smudge any openings that lead to the outside of the house, including any taps or drains that could possibly act as a passageway. The entire time that you are smudging, continue to think positive and good thoughts, and ask the Creator to provide you with positive energy. Now, the fifth and final step in the process of smudging your house with sage is to let the sacred medicine burn out without any interference. It's important to allow the sacred medicine to burn out on its own without interfering, as the smoke is creating a direct path to the Creator. The smoke from the medicine creates a spiritual bloodline and a communication line from Mother Earth and the spirit world. So this means the smoke will stop burning when it is meant to. While the medicine is burning out in its natural way, the final step of the smudging process is to give thanks to the Creator for allowing us to use the sacred medicines that have been given to us. As a final step, return the ashes to Mother Earth and give thanks, as these gifts of sacred medicines are not only used to heal our mind, body, and spirit, but also to perform the smudge in our home to create a sacred space for our loved ones to enjoy a positive and happy life. So we've gone through all 5 steps of the smudging process on how to correctly smudge your house with sage, which are 1. To prepare your smudge kit, 2. Lighting the medicine, 3. Fan the smoke from the medicine to yourself or smudge yourself, 4. Fan the smoke from the medicine around the room or your house, and 5. Let the medicine burn out on its own and give thanks to the Creator. Now, after following these 5 steps on how to smudge your house with sage, you could feel absolutely confident when you use this or another sacred medicine to cleanse or purify yourself, others, or your home. If you're wanting to learn more about the various sacred medicines and for more details on the smudging process, download our free guide at the link below in in the description. Be sure to check us out at tribaltradeco.com and use this special coupon code for 15% off your order. Please reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram if you have any questions. If you like this video, please let us know by hitting the like button. Tell us what you liked about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.
Good.
Hey, what you think this is? Who you think you are? Who me? My name is Allah, and I'm a motherfucking outlaw, a outlaw. I'm a outlaw, a outlaw, a motherfucking outlaw. I drew the line in the sand. You better know where you stand. If you pumping with a strong heart, come on, tear this shit apart. I'm in the midst of my prime, Robin Hood with my crimes, making sure we staying healthy at every mealtime. Hey, you could be my lookout if you got some spine. Don't be making this music just cause I can rhyme. I stay making this music to neutralize the messages that be telling you to die. You're killing yourself. No, you're killing me with you. When you're killing yourself, no, you're killing me with you. Yo, I'ma try for a minute to get these words out. Talking for no reason, ain't what I'm about. So any speech you hear from me has got a deeper meaning. Not a college student, but I still be dreaming. No tips to the, but I still be leaning. Love to see the sellouts, things squirm, be dodging my knowledge like it was germs. Cause truth is a crucial part of our art, so we take it back. Every last time part to try to act like the doubt, but I can spot an imposter. From a mile away, step to me, that's what I hear my mama say. Do not te dejes, mija. That's how I was raised. Do not te calles, mija. That's how I was raised. Así dice el machista. Ahí viene la maldita, la flaquita, la que siempre me grita. Con mi siempre se desquita. No sé por qué no le gusta que le digas mamacita. Hey chiquita. Do you know the meaning of the word fatigue? Walking everywhere and TikTok because full of things I don't stop down the street. No predators, stay creeping. There you fuck with me, about to catch a beat. Now keep rocks in my pockets, mace on my chain. Warrior homies don't show restraint. They fully prepared to catch a case. Getting murked if your pleasure means my pain. Getting murked if your pleasure means my pain. Hey, what you think this is? Who you think you are? I'm a warrior for Earth, a motherfucking outlaw. Ain't got no paper, so we stay alert. To dodge them haters, gotta stay alert. To dodge them pigs, y'all me born through, so that's the way we live. See, we ain't asking, please no more. Every nice thing you see me with, I probably stole. Poor, stupid, and quiet, that's supposed to be my role. But I stay scheming and scamming, cause I never been handed a goddamn advantage. I ain't asking, I ain't asking no more. Yo, this my life, this my voice, and I'm taking control. Cause I know the meaning of the word fatigue. Going home, sounding like bleaching bird degrees. With feet so you can't walk no more. Got to rob the register, run out the back door. 60 nowadays with the good fucking boss and buried to no pay. Ruthless, it was a millimeter away from my fist tearing up that smirk on his face. Hey, do you know what this is? Do you know who I are? I don't even know if I'm gonna make it, but while I'm around, believe I'm gonna shake it up. Get your body loose when you thought you was stuck. Be alone when you wanna wake up. Wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. I don't even know if I'm gonna make it. While I'm around, believe I'm gonna shake it up. Get your body loose when you thought you was stuck. Be alone when you wanna wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Pequeños, mira mamá, pues dice, los pequeños no los había visto, acaban de nacer. Acaban de nacer. Porque el papá es a la mamá.
Warrior, was a warrior. We got a code that we live by, right? It's for all my old get you die. Let's go! Calling out them AKs, 4.5s and ARs. Don't be tripping, man, cause you know that we will play hard. This is our country, so these strangers better stay far. Hella loco, man, put you right into that graveyard. Hear us with the battle sounds, fear us on the battlegrounds. Play around, let's gamble round, so much we can handle now. Fighting back became a cause since they started breaking law. Miss squad, Wabish Kaba, full blood, oh get your dog. Let the arrows fly. They will carry pride. They will bury towns when the warriors collide. I will never run and hide. Creator be my guide for the people that I love. I will fight so they survive. We protect the young. We help them by God. We teach them to love. We raise them in life. I'm bleeding the blood of warrior times, seeking their blood to warrior cries. I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code. I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code. Smudge with the brothers, roll up the loud. Never back down, warriors remain proud. Go grab your pistols, shotties and rifles. The death count rising like the American snipers. Beat the drum and a war cry. Fuck with the trap, someone's finna die. I'm medicine man, pray we move unseen. Praise no harm comes over to the team. If you didn't like me then, you won't like me now. Put me a serpent straight in the ground. Why do I think the way I think and do the things I do? I die for any member of my crew, cause I'm the chief and I live for mine. Die for mine, put a blade in your spine. Not scared of prison and no, not death. Mind like crazy horse till my last breath. I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code. I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code.
I'ma live by it, I'ma die by it. This code right here won't ride without it. I'm a Winnipeg boy and I'm loud about it. Got the cops hating, who care about it? I stay blessed from these streets. That's that type of love you don't beat. All these real thugs, real G's. That's them same wars you gon' see. On them battlefields we don't run. Black powder banging them guns. My neighbors speaking in tongues. Our elders banging them drums. Now what? Our time has come to show the devil we ain't done. Armageddon has begun. Killing them one by one.
I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code. I live the warrior code. I got the warrior code. Protect the young, protect the young. That is the warrior code.
As to the rest of the news, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan has shocked and appalled Americans from all walks of life, and for good reason, too. It's simply unacceptable that anyone living in a democracy, let alone the richest country on earth, should lose access to clean drinking water or risk poisoning their kids by doing something as simple as giving them a bath. But while the Flint disaster might be catching all the headlines, a similar crisis out in the American Southwest isn't drawing much attention at all. And it's been going on for decades. Could it be because the people affected are, by and large, Native Americans? Joining me now to answer this question and help explain America's other big water crisis is tribal rights attorney Tara Houska. Tara, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you with us. So some have said that the water crisis affecting the Native American communities in the West is worse than Flint, Michigan. What's the story?
So the water crisis throughout Indian country really is something that is, as you said, undiscussed and kind of unnoticed, and it's been going on for centuries. Particularly with uranium mining, that's been happening since the 1950s. Cancer is, the leading people that have cancer are in the northern plains, and as a specific result of uranium mining, particularly lung cancer, the highest demographic in all the United States. And that's not being discussed.
Really?
We've got 30% of the Navajo Nation that doesn't have clean drinking water. This is an ongoing issue of open mines that are just left, and no one's cleaning them up. There's been efforts to try and remediate, and those efforts usually die in Congress, unfortunately.
Wow. And meanwhile, although it's not totally apropos of this, but there's this huge movement to privatize even more federal lands, which will mean even more mines and more destruction of the land in and around Indian country, in that part of the country.
Absolutely, and federal lands, we're pushing through, they're trying to push through legislation to keep it in the ground, right? Because they're looking at federal leasing. Federal lands are often right next to Native American communities.
Right.
And so these extraction projects directly impact Native American communities, and no one cares. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
And that's kind of an overall theme.
So how do we bring it to sight?
I think there are efforts, obviously there are grassroots efforts on the ground to, draw attention to these issues, but really, I'm hopeful that there will be a coalition of people of color to really, understand that the Flint, Michigan issue, it's a perfect example of the United States' disparate treatment of minority people and, not caring about our minority populations when we should, because, just simply because you're poor doesn't mean that you don't matter.
Right.
And if we can form those coalitions of people saying, hey, this is going on with these people, but this is also happening in Indian country, and it has been for a really long time. These are oppressed people we should recognize and, take care of, and address these issues. They're incredibly important issues.
I hear commentators refer to, quote, communities of color or people of color, and then sometimes they'll even break it down and they'll say African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and usually they stop there. Sometimes they'll say Native Americans. What percentage of the population in the United States is Native American compared to those other, if you know off the top of your head? And has the genocide been so complete that accounts for some of the ignoring of what's going on, or is it more of the political structure that Native American communities, being on reservations, many of them, tend to be more isolated from at least the big news media centers? They're not outside New York and Washington, D.C., that kind of thing.
I think it's a combination of factors, particularly education. So, in the United States, and, this is the population for Native Americans, right? Like, American Indians are from the United States. Over 87% of references in public schools to Native Americans are pre-1900s. After that, they don't learn anything about Native Americans. So in their minds, we don't exist. And then there's, you got sports mascots backing that concept up, that, we're still in headdresses living in, planes, that these people are not real people. And counter that with, they're 2% of the population. We're this tiny, little minority population. Most people don't know that we still exist. They don't know their treaty rights. They don't understand that we're living in cities, that we're living on reservations. It's a multifaceted issue.
Yeah, it really is. As a follow-up, we talked, I think last time you were on here, about Jeff Flake and John McCain basically giving away the Apache Tears, the land, the Oak Flats, I think it's called, in Arizona, that the San Carlos Apaches have been using ceremonially for millennia, for thousands of years. What's the status on that? We've got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, so right now, I mean, Congressman Grijalva introduced legislation to repeal the part that actually gave that sacred site to the mining operation. That's stalled out, so it's sitting there in Congress and nothing's happening, unfortunately.
Stuck in committee.
Nothing's happening. You know, they're not introducing the bill. And the grassroots effort, I mean, this is actually, we're coming up on the year anniversary that they've been occupying that site. So at the end of this month, February 26th and 27th, they're going to be doing a march from Old San Carlos to the site.
Thank you for telling me about that. We will publicize the heck out of that.
Yeah.
Tara, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming.
I would also add, and should add, this law of discovery as well. If we remove this stupid blood quantum thing, that percentage of population that they claim is only indigenous population in the United States would grow much higher. But we wouldn't want that, right?
There's also
I'm
Welcome,
almost
Sue.
ready to do some game timing. So I am going to raid and end my stream because it's time to play some gaming. Gotta have some gaming fun in your life too, right?
No, no fun allowed.
Fun is illegal.
So I want to thank everyone for coming today. I love you all. I want you all to be in the best health possible. And I do not see my friend online yet. Hint, hint. Yes, Mama M. Open Legends time.
Oh, hey, Mama M.
And they can't hear you guys. They just hear me.
I'm pretty sure they can.
You think they can?
As your desktop audio is coming out, they can.
Oh, really?
Hi, Mama M.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mama M. Hi, hi, hi.
Hi.
Okay, well, as soon as you go live here, I'll raid into you.
It'll be a minute. There we go.
Oops. They hear us all. My bad.
I hear you too, chat. I'm listening.
Y'all missed it, man. I was like, Mark Charles was like getting right into how the Christian church went from being how Jesus was trying to explain it to becoming corrupt and taking part in the government and being all the, oh yeah, you missed it. You missed all the good shit.
Okay.
No, don't listen to my thoughts. They are playing. Mama.
What number of session is this now?
4 or
4?
5, I think. 4?
The last one was 4. It is 5.
Ah, session 5.
Session 5. Okay. Confirming. Oh, look. Let me copy this. I'm not gonna tell anybody else because if they're not in my Discord, then they probably aren't gonna watch this anyways. And I'm live now. You can read me.
So question.
What's up?
Quick. Which direction did I flee again? Right before meeting everyone?
Let me show you.
Was it
Are you in? You're in open the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So where exactly you are, it's somewhere in here. I don't know, but you're headed towards Lilith's, which is here. So
I headed south.
I guess yeah.
Okay.
I love how it takes its sweet time. There it is. There we are. It takes its sweet time showing it.
Everyone. And boom. Okay.
Hey, did you see that Alexis the Tranarchist is going live?
Oh wow, Alexis the Tranarchist is live?
Wow, Alexis the Tranarchist is live.
I don't know.
Oh, apparently I was idling in your stream, Sue. I didn't realize that.
Oh, nice.
What's that?
I apparently was idling in your stream.
Yeah, you were chilling in my stream for a while. Okay, everybody, thanks for hanging with me. Come join us over here with Alexis, an awesome streamer as well. Good people, love her madly. We're about to get into game time, so yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
Welcome.
Are we live?
Yeah, we just went live.
Hi, Joe.
Sorry, Raiders, I'm stuffing my face. 1 second. Sorry, Raiders, I'm stuffing my face. 1 second.